Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all again. My name is Karen Wilcutz with the North Lake Tahoe Truckee Leadership Program. Once again, we decided not to give our regular leadership program this year, but we wanted to bring special classes to the community. And so we brought in Kim Webster from Own It Consulting. Hi, Kim. Nice to see you again. Thanks you for coming back. She's going to talk to you all about team meetings and how to make them, the best ever. So in order to give her as much time as possible, I'm going to hand it over to Kim. So go ahead and take it away.
Hey, thanks, Karen. I wasn't sure if you had anything to screen share, so I will go for it. Give me one sec. All right. So yeah, this meeting today, thank you all for being here. I see some familiar faces from 2 weeks ago, so nice to be back. This training is all about remote and hybrid meeting facilitation and leadership. So kind of thinking about it, we've been at this for a year. What have we learned? What can we do to kind of tighten this up? Just as for those of you who have not met me before, I'm Kim Webster. I'm from Own It Consulting. And this is a little bit about me, just to get to know me. I'm super passionate about leadership development and supporting that through coaching as well as facilitation. And I'm really excited to be able to support local leaders here in the Truckee community and the Tahoe community because I live in Soda Springs. So I'm part of the community. And so there's a little bit more details about my background on this slide. But the big thing is I'm a coach and a consultant, and I work to do meeting design as well as coach people on how to do meetings well. So today is part of that. And then my interests, of course, are across all the Tahoe outdoor activities. I've been doing a lot of Royal Gorge skiing up here in Soda Springs this year. I'm doing some cross country, which has been fun. And my meeting pet peeve is when there's no agenda. So I'd love to hear from you all. If you don't mind jumping into the chat, what is your meeting pet peeve? I'd love to hear back and see what else people hate about meetings. There's a lot to love, but there's a lot to hate sometimes. And while you're chatting, I'll go ahead and get us give a little orientation of what you can expect today. So, like I said, if you're just showing up, just chat in your meeting pet peeve. Now I want to read them. Okay, I love it. So there's the sharing of the mic, having them go off topic, no agenda, the timing. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, and then the virtual, Nicole, your virtual example resonates as well when people don't know about the mute. So great. The objectives for today are listed here. So really what we're going to do is talk about some core facilitation principles for running both remote and hybrid meetings. So we'll talk about both. I know some folks are working in a fully virtual environment still, and some are starting to have more hybrid experiences coming up. And we're going to look at some strategies for how, like some actual meeting designs that you can use to mix up your formats of how you're doing these meetings. And then hopefully you'll take away with at least 2 different strategies that you really want to use going forward. And our agenda today is here. It's pretty straightforward. Just going to get you started, do a little framing. We're going to take some time together in breakouts to surface some of the key challenges that you've been thinking about from the pre-work and just as coming up to this workshop. Then we will do I'll go through some principles for facilitation and then some key strategies for designing your meetings in virtual and hybrid. And then we'll have a chance to do some more breakouts again to think about next steps. And that's it. That's how we're going to spend the 2 hours. And our norms for today, I just want to kind of put these out here. If you were here 2 weeks ago, these are really the same ones. I wanted to make sure this 2-hour session, asking you all to stay the whole time. I appreciate that one person mentioned she had to leave a little bit early. That's understandable, but just let it, to the degree possible, be present. And then if you have to check your phone or something like that, doing that, sparingly as needed. Take care of yourself. It's a 2-hour session, so if you do need to take a bio break or turn your camera off, just do that as needed. And then be vulnerable in context. So this is a group that isn't necessarily formed as we don't have an agreement together in terms of confidentiality and all of that, because it is a different configuration of people. So just keep that in mind, but then also lean into this opportunity for some peer support. So I like to think about it as like a cafe share level. If you're in a coffee shop meeting with somebody one-on-one, share things that you might not be too worried if somebody overheard you talking about, but it can still be, something that's personal enough that it's, helpful and relevant for you. And then the third one is step up, step back. So pushing ourselves to step up. If you haven't been talking much and or participating, push yourself to kind of step up. On the other side of that, if you're hearing your voice a lot, maybe step back and see who else might want to speak up that might not have shown raise their hand yet. And we'll be using the chat in different ways throughout to try to also enforce like hearing more voices as many voices as possible. And then participate respectfully is the last one. Just really want to have everybody, while we're here, to be present, to mute your microphones if there's background noise, and then of course to consider the impact of your words on others as you're sharing. So we want to have there be collaboration, but also respect in that space. And also to try things on. There might be ideas shared that you're skeptical about, so go ahead and lean into that a little bit and try it on, and be respectful of the person that shared them. So if those 5 norms sound okay to you, if you could just either chat in that it works or give me a thumbs up if you're on the video, that works for you, that would be great. Awesome. I see some video. Nice. Nicole just popped back on. And I see Julie and Denise chatted it in. So, all right. So that's how we'll operate today. I'm excited to be here. So framing a little bit the session for you all, I wanted to start out with really just talking about why meetings matter. So this is super self-explanatory, but then sometimes we don't really stop to think about it. The meetings that we sit, because we're so tired of sitting through them, right? It's like our whole day. But really the meetings that are the backbone of a lot of our companies and our organizations really are built from them. So they're way that we build our relationships. They are how we can really spark collaboration and creativity because we're in a space together, which is not always the case, especially if you're working virtually. And it also helps to create organizational alignment. So, obviously if you don't ever if we're working in silos and we don't ever get together, then we're going to have not be aligned. And then meetings help to facilitate decision-making and also provide a space for feedback as well as employee engagement. So they're really important ways of accomplishing our work and our outcomes that we need to do, obviously. It's just helpful to frame in that because we spend a lot of time in them, sometimes resenting them, sometimes not, sometimes loving them, but it's helpful to sort of be like, oh yeah, that's important. So the thing that I wanted to talk, obviously we're talking about today, is more around the remote and hybrid meetings. And so a lot of the same principles that you would use for designing an effective in-person meeting, like for example, having an agenda or having, the things that we talked about were our pet peeves, right? Having people follow the time. Those same principles apply when you're running an effective remote meeting or a virtual meeting. And I think the change in context that we've experienced in the last year, where a lot of us have anyway moved from being in person to being virtual or hybrid, does provide opportunities and challenges. And then also right now is hard. So, we've been at it, like I said, for a year, a lot of us that haven't been working in a remote setting before that. And while you've already made it through 2020, now we're facing more changes and uncertainty looking ahead. So thinking about how you can bring your team and your organization into the unknown territory of post-COVID, if that's even a thing. But there's really no returning to pre-COVID. And so there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's next. And I think the reality of this moment just is, it can't be understated of how long it's been, how long we've been in this mode. So I want to, thinking about it another way, we're sort of on this boat. Leaders and managers are on a boat with their teams, and they left the shore, and they, the shore was like their comfort zone, what they did before, and now they're floating in the middle of the ocean. And they've been doing that for about a year, and they still can't see the other shore, right? We don't really know what that looks like yet. We just know that we had to leave how things were working before because of the pandemic. So this sense of not yet arriving can be unsettling. And I think really the work of leading through that is really hard. So if you're leading a team or facilitating a group, it's a challenge right now. So I really just want to acknowledge and commend those of you who are here to really, that you're keeping at this and working to innovate and improve after a whole year of being in this learning edge and being in this, at sea situation in your boat. So I think it's a really powerful work, but it can be really exhausting to lead through the change. And I know that if you were here last week, you might have been talking about change management. So it's a lot. So thinking about that, I'd love to hear from you. What feelings arise for you when you start thinking about continuing to work and lead your work through the upcoming changes and uncertainties of 2021? So just chat in a couple of feelings that come up for you when you are considering this upcoming year and all the uncertainty that's still kind of out there. Yeah, thank you for chatting stuff in. I see a theme a little bit around feeling burnt out or tired, potentially a little optimism, but also some anxiety. Yeah, tired, and just kind of the sense of question mark, right? Will we be productive? Can we make this happen? Yeah. Oh, I like that, Kylie. Thanks for sharing the idea of like there's going to be different experiences for different people and how to balance that as well. And if there's anybody who wants to unmute and share more, I'll give you a minute now if there's anybody who wants to speak to something they threw in the chat. It's almost sounding like it's a moment here where people are hitting a wall. Were you going to say something, Nicole?
Yeah, I was going to just kind of this comment that Janelle just made about like people, whether or not people are showing up to their best, which like I feel like for the past year, there's been extra space given for people to, process extra emotions and deal with the anxiety of COVID. But like, at what point does that extra space start to close, or do we start like shortening the leash on, extra flexibility? Does it close, or does it just keep going like this? I don't know, because like, we're still in transition. Most people are still working from home. It's like I don't know. How much grace do you keep giving? And at what point does that kind of come back to what it used to be? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like in some ways maybe we've learned to be more empathetic through this of what's going on around us and trying to incorporate that more into how we show up for our colleagues. But at what point does that then impact outcomes and what's the right balance? And if we haven't hit it yet, are we going to? Is 2021 that year or not? Yeah, there's a lot there. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else that was hoping to verbalize or point out anything that they saw in the chat?
Sure, I'll chime in. I think what's been challenging so far and looking into 2021 is there is a stark difference between the optimist and the pessimist for best case scenario for COVID. And it's hard. I do a lot of event planning. So it's just like some people, oh, we'll be fine. Everyone will be vaccinated. We can do it. Others are like, no way. We've been in red for a week, you know, so there's a lot of trying to predict the future. And we tried to predict the future last year. I thought we would maybe have concerts last fall. That's laughable now. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is working on a team when some people are very optimistic and some people are pessimistic, and doing too much work towards something that won't ever be able to happen.
Totally understandable. And what a like specific industry to be in where you're dealing with like the front line of that. Thanks for sharing that, Kylie. I thought there was one person trying to jump in also around this prompt that you wanted to talk. If not, it's fine, but if just want to give the space if somebody was trying to share another reflection. Well, I'm gonna move us forward then, but I really appreciate everybody's sharing kind of where we're at. I think emotionally sometimes, you know, we do check in all the time. It's like, oh, with our teams and everything else. But when you're coming at this topic, which can be tedious sometimes, like planning virtual meetings over and over again and trying to solve for the same challenges. But I really appreciate folks, you know, being really honest about where they're at in that process. So for the next section, I wanted to actually take a little time for us to hear from each other about the challenges that are related to remote and hybrid teams in a little more detail. So kind of moving into some breakout groups to really get a little bit more specific and hear from each other. So the way it's going to work is you'll be put into triads, but Karen will be doing the breakout, jockeying the breakouts. And in the group, once you get in there, you're going to spend a couple minutes just assigning a note taker and a timekeeper. And then in this, during the time that you're together, you'll have about 12 minutes total to talk through some of the reflection questions that were part of the pre-work. And then you'll have 6 minutes at the end. Oh, sorry, during the 12 minutes, we just ask that you facilitate to make sure everybody gets a chance to share. So try to keep it to 3 or 4 minutes per person. And then at the end, the group can then look at what talk about what they've heard and try to identify what the trends are among the 3 of them around the challenges. And then pick somebody who's going to be their sharing out person. So you'll have a few minutes to do that at the end. I will chat out a protocol for you to follow during this time. The other thing I want to point out before I do that, though, is while you're in the group, so I'm going to ask the note takers to take notes in the group note catcher, which is actually in the slide deck. So it will be linked into the protocol, but just so you know, that's where the notes will go in this slide. Any questions? I'm going to I'll chat out the protocol and then I'll ask again if there's questions, make sure it makes sense to everybody. And again, if you didn't submit the survey for the group work or for the pre-work, that's fine. The same questions are there and you can kind of discuss them with your teammates and share some thoughts in the moment. And if you did do the pre-work, you'll be uber prepared to jump in and share some of your reflections that you've done before. So thumbs up if folks were able to get to that, open that document and see the protocol. Let's see. Julie, your question is, will you be able to see, do you want access to the stuff you already put in to the survey when you were reflecting? Is that your question? Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
I'm in the same boat. Like I submitted it through the survey. And so now I'm like, it was electronically submitted. I didn't, it was through the Google document, I guess. I didn't.
I don't know because I think the data is anonymous in the survey. So I'm not sure if I could figure out who and send it to them. Do you have any thoughts, Karen? And we could share the summary and people could find their own data in there, but we didn't tell people that we'd be sharing it. So I don't know if I want to, you know, break that confidentiality.
Why don't we think about this while they're working at it?
Well, yeah, I think they're hoping to have it as a reference as they were having the conversations. But yeah, so it's Lisa and Julie and Janelle that we're asking. So we can, if we have a solution, we'll find you in your groups and share it. Does that work? Awesome. All right. So I think that's all. Are there any other questions about what we're doing and once you get into your space?
The only question I have is the group note catcher. Did you say we were gonna get access to that?
Yeah, so it's in the protocol that I shared out, but I will also just share.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yep.
Slide deck. Okay, I can give you the slide deck as well, so you have it. Just for double safety that everybody has access. All right, I think we're ready. Karen, do you want to launch the groups? And during the groups, I'll give you a couple time checks so you all know, but then definitely have somebody on time to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share. So, all right. Okay. Everyone's making their way back, I think. Oops. All right, I believe that we're all back here. It would seem, yes, nobody's lost in the ether, hopefully. All right, so we're gonna just spend a little time just hearing from folks. Let me go ahead and screen share. You can see the group note catcher live. It's a little small, so let's see. There we go. All right, so I'd love to hear from the spokespeople. I'm gonna go in reverse order to keep you on your toes. So group 3, who's sharing? Tell us what you got.
I am, this is Nicole. Am I unmuted? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so our kind of main challenges that we came up with, one just being technology-based challenges, mostly internet connectivity, depending on where you live. You know, Tahoe is better than some rural areas. There's definitely rural areas worse off than us, but there's, you know, out of our control technology challenges are a big one. Maintaining motivation and engagement in staff, but then also something that kind of came up specifically with that is the amount of time supervisors are spending managing or motivating their staff in their productivity. And so the supervisors are finding themselves, you know, putting a lot more time into that than they were before the virtual work world. And then, you know, just in general, finding ways to make virtual meetings and virtual work more innovative and exciting so that people want to be engaged. And then balancing the variety of virtual work experiences that people have, and that difference between the pessimistic and optimistic outlook for the future, but also like very much recognizing that, you know, there's people working from home with 2 kids that they're also homeschooling at the same time as they're doing their board meeting or whatever, versus people like myself that don't have kids and don't have roommates and have a home office and have way less distractions, and that variety of the work from home experience, and how to balance that and also respect that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole, and group 3 for your reflections. That's really helpful to hear. Group 2, let's have you join us and share. Whoever's in charge.
So our common challenges that came up in our conversations was we felt working from home and virtual allowed us access too much. We had too many meetings. A lot of meetings filling our day. There was a challenge setting work and life boundaries when working from home, when it's all blended together, taking time for yourself. And another challenge was varying degrees of tech savviness on teams. Some people it came naturally to switch to remote, and others not as much. So working through that challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kylie. And group 2. All right, group 1, what you're on? Let's hear from you.
Yeah, so a lot of what we discussed, the things already mentioned, and overall, I think there was a theme that it works for half the people and it doesn't work for half the people, so that just kind of causes inequity. But for starters, you have no water cooler conversations, so you're not really building rapport or relationships. Makes it challenging for certain meetings when you might need to brainstorm or think a little bit more creatively. It's kind of just when everyone's like back-to-back Zooms, it just seems a little bit more regimented. Not everyone has the workspace at home needed to be effective, whether that means Wi-Fi, printer, or like a desk space where there's no distractions. And again, half the staff can work effectively remotely, but others cannot. So one example was with a larger company where it was up to the managers whether or not they would give their team permission to work from home. So there would be team members that were granted permission and then others that weren't, and some might want it. So just another example of inequitable situations.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a big, that's a big responsibility on the manager, I would think. I appreciate that. So thanks group 1 for sharing out. Just to open it up to the larger group for just a minute, do you have any observations around like trends or threads that are going throughout the discussions now that you've heard from everybody? Anything standing out?
I'm not sure I'm not sure that this is accurate, but what I heard was more problems than successes, for sure.
Yeah, and that could have been the prompts too. And we focused on the problems a little bit, but that's helpful to note.
I think that was the case even for our discussion. Like I had a couple successes, but I'm like, I have far more challenges. So
yeah,
that feels like an accurate assessment.
Yeah, that's your experience as well. That makes sense. I mean, we've also been at it for a while, and kind of from the beginning, kind of that reflection on how people are feeling. There's also a sense of it's hard to sustain optimism about all these new practices for this long, so it's understandable that things might feel more challenging right now after this many months.
This is Heidi. I think part of it too is it depends on the field that you're in. So if you're in a high tech and the MO is always to be in your cubicle by yourself with a headphone talking to customers remotely, and that was your life before you were a gamer, that was okay. But if you're in the field in which you're interacting with the human species, and it's been very challenging, and it's very exhausting. And there's a skill set of communicating, especially we're with a nonprofit and working with donors and working with people that come to our parks and to our facilities. And it's a whole different skill set, talking 2-dimensionally and 3-dimensionally. And hopefully and it's hard to solidify the skill of nonverbal language.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mean nonverbal language when you're on a virtual? Oh,
no,
when you're
so when you're talking to somebody, because the virtual screen for me is very difficult. Half the people I just see names or I see still faces, so I'm not really communicating with anybody eye to eye. So I can't see, is there an agreement? Is there understanding? Tell me more. And then of course in person, the whole putting the arms together, looking back, you can tell when somebody's being impatient. So communication styles have definitely been a challenge.
Oh, thanks, Heidi. That's really, I think there's a couple things in there. Definitely the differences across industries and how it's impacting, based on the type of work that you've been doing. can be a bigger impact and bigger change for you than other folks. And then, yeah, that idea of individual skill sets and who's able to thrive. We heard something around tech savviness is another skill set. That also is, varies from person to person and makes it hard to plan for everyone. And one of the groups saying that it only works for half is it's like a hard thing, right? How do you decide what the plan is if only half your team is going to be able to succeed in said plan? So these are some real challenges. Thank you all. And I really appreciate when I popped into the rooms like a creepy spy, I got to hear little snippets, but it was nice to hear everybody really sharing and being open to kind of where they're stuck. So hopefully the next sections are going to help spark some ideas to address some of the challenges that have come up. So thank you all. And we're going to jump into that. So the next thing I wanted to share were just a few little, basically we're going to do a few minutes of some concepts and then some time to do some individual reflection and planning. And we'll do that 2 different times on 2 different topics. So the first topic is around remote and hybrid team meeting facilitation principles. So these are 4 principles that I've found to be effective, and some might be totally new to you and they might be like just refreshing, or you've already got this down, right? So it'll be probably a range for each of you in terms of whether they are feeling resonating and familiar or they're new for you. So the first is over communicate, over engage, then systems, talk about systems, and then culture and hybrid meetings are special. So we'll have a little time for those because they're a little bit of a special snowflake. So I'm just going to jump in and share. And like I said, you'll have a little chance to reflect at the end of this section. So over communicate and over engage. There are several elements to this principle, but it's so important. That's why I put it first, because it's just like when everybody's spread apart in a dispersed team, as we've all experienced, the more you can focus on this, the more effective your meetings can be. So one element of it is really assuming, as you all know, that any virtual participant's going to be more distracted. So when you're delivering information, that means you're going to want to do it in multiple formats. So you're going to want to have videos, you want to have verbal communication, written communication, pre-reading, post-reading, that kind of thing, to make sure messages get through, because they're not going to get through the first time, most likely, because of the nature of being virtual or even hybrid, because there's a lot of distraction there. And then checks for understanding. So when you're thinking about the distractions, having people be a little more on their toes by using the chat feature or Zoom polls in creative ways to make sure people are following and really getting the information. The other element for over communication and over engage is around norms. So we've probably all established some norms over the last year as you went into virtual world. And I think it's just an important thing to make sure that you are taking a chance to reestablish them as needed, whether your team meetings are switching to become hybrid right now, or if you're just like feeling like it's stale and not working, like some of the motivation is waning, people are not engaged as much. So taking the chance to think about things like how you want to use videos during meetings. Do you want to have them on all the time? Do you want to make it a norm that they're off for certain times because of Zoom fatigue? Like thinking that through. And then things like how you want to do things like agendas, sending out agendas in advance and pre-work and that kind of thing. There could be an opportunity to reestablish some tightness around that as well. And then the other piece around of reestablishing norms could mean around shared leadership on this. So a lot of times managers feel like they have to take everything on, but really when you're thinking about engaging and having the team really own their own work, there's a lot of opportunity there sometimes to bring in other voices. And the third element of this principle is around breakouts. So making sure you incorporate breakouts and peer collaboration time. I think one of the groups was talking about the sort of lack of the water cooler, and that's a huge challenge right now. So we have so much knowledge sharing that can happen in informal moments, and so few of those. So just making sure when you're structuring and you're facilitating, that you include the time for peer breakouts and peer collaboration, and recognize like that is actually an important part of the work that you're doing, and making sure people, so you can do it to share knowledge, and also so people have a chance to sort of apply what they just learned immediately in a small group, because it does help them learn and solidify what your information that you're putting out there, or new concepts, new strategies, etc. So that's the over communicate, over engage principle. And I'm going to just keep going through and go ahead and I just wanted to see the chat real quick. Yes, Lisa, thanks for the cosign there. I don't know when that one came in. So yeah, it's definitely one of the things. It's exhausting, agreed. And it's also super important. The second principle is around systems. I said it 3 times because I think it's really important. Systems are so key, and they really build off of that communication. You can have the best intention around communication, but if your systems are terrible, then it's just not going to be as effective. So the first element is really making your digital systems really easy to follow. So for example, if you have a digital space like Google Drive, making sure that the Google Drive is well organized, or wherever you're storing files is. And then there's naming conventions that you use, so it's easy to locate a previous agenda, for example. And that you have kind of all, as much as possible, and this speaks to the folks that are a little less tech savvy on your team, trying to keep things in one platform to the degree that you can. I think that can be where you lose a lot of engagement from folks when you are facilitating, is if there's like having to do 3 different logins to get to stuff. So, oh, I forgot to click, sorry. And then the second element around systems is around transparency. So as the facilitator, it's super important that not only to have the systems, but to constantly use them and consistently use them. That can be harder for some of us than others, but being able to model that will help to instill it into your team. And then also it will be able to, you'll build trust. So people that can self-access information, we know can build trust. And if your systems are really easy to access, that's going to help everybody be able to work better together. It's kind of the back end of facilitation. And then structures. So having tight, consistent structures for remote and hybrid meetings is super key. One of the, what you might use for an agenda in a live in-person meeting might not be detailed enough for a remote facilitation or a hybrid facilitation. The meeting agendas that you use in a live meeting might, don't necessarily need to have the level of detail to communicate in advance what to expect and to keep us all on time. And then, so thinking about those consistent structures, I did put a sample in the slide deck. If you want to click into it, you can. This is an example of a project working group meeting that I've used with a dispersed team that was hybrid. So some folks that were in the office together and some that were remote. It was a national organization. And it was a working group. So we had a project that we're working on for 6 months. And this team, the level of, it might be overkill to you, depending on your style, the level of detail. But as you can see, the meeting, the tight, consistent structure, it has the exact purpose of the meeting, the roles, every time you kind of go through and say who's doing what. You talk about what your objectives are. It's really clear how to prepare for the meeting, what will happen, and then what the next steps are. And then also there's a chance to reflect at the end on how things went, so you can always improve what you're doing. So as you're designing something like this, maybe you already have an agenda and you want to tweak it. It can be a really good time to do that as you're reestablishing in a new format, for example, moving into hybrid. And when you're doing it, you could also make sure it reflects your values. So at this organization, we always did a check-in question. So that was sort of structured into how we did our meetings. So pretty straightforward, but it's an example of maybe like overly structuring your systems to some people. And then the third principle is around culture. So one of the biggest challenges with remote and hybrid teams is being dispersed. And so feeling like culture kind of goes by the wayside. So as you're planning a facilitation for a meeting, keeping that in the forefront is super key. and you have to be really intentional about it. So there could be ways to involve the team. That's one of the big elements of this, which I've kind of said a couple of times, but really they're the ones that are going to know what works best for them. And you can identify the problem of saying, hey, we need to build connections, but you need to put it to them to help figure out, like, how does that work for us, right? Because there is a diverse group of people with different skills and different comfort levels on tech. And then, you can redefine or define your team's values and norms as well for how you're going to do remote and hybrid culture stuff. The second piece of the element of this principle is around baking it into your meeting. So it's easy to forget, so you got to kind of put it into how you're doing things. So doing inclusive icebreakers and check-ins at every meeting, asking for feedback every time so that you can always improve and make sure your meetings are effective for them. Having the chance to hold folks accountable for norms while you're in meetings. And then you can even, for like a offsite or a retreat, you could mail virtual people that are remote workers a goodie bag or snack box, and that really helps to build that inclusiveness of the community, because it can feel a little awkward when your teammates are all eating a snack and you're just like miles away with your same leftovers that you always eat or something like that. So there's ways to kind of build that culture and that connection. And then the water cooler space is the third element. So I'm glad that came up earlier as a challenge, because it really is such a gap when you have a virtual team or a hybrid team to lack those informal conversations by the water cooler, so to speak. So there's a few ideas here. You can do virtual happy hours where everybody's virtual, even the folks that are in person on the team. You can also do things like, I put breakout roulette, where you kind of randomly at the end of a meeting, you could just do breakouts where there's like a discussion prompt and it's happy hour, and you can just hang out with some coworkers in a more informal way, which is not always a way that we're using Zoom for meetings. And then, yeah, you could just do something as simple as having folks log in early as a norm, or encouraged to log in early and just hang out for a few minutes. So there's a little bit of informal time baked in. And fourth, but not least, is the hybrid principles around hybrid meetings are special. So hybrids meetings are a lot of the same things that work for virtual meetings work for them, but there's a little bit of a difference. One of the biggest challenges when you're working with a hybrid team is making sure that inclusivity is there, especially for folks who are remote. And a lot of times they don't feel included when there's folks in the room and they're kind of this little head on a laptop. So there's some steps to take specifically when you're facilitating that type of meeting that can help. So the first is to plan for technology. And that means continuing to use the digital meeting tools that you're already using as a remote team potentially, but keeping that as how you work together even in the office. And what that does is really level the playing field. So if you're doing a brainstorm, keep doing it in Miro or in Jamboard or wherever you've been doing it remotely, as opposed to doing it on a flip chart in a room where the folks that are the remote participants on the team won't be able to read it, that kind of thing. And then you can also invite virtual attendees to join early so that you're planning, you're making sure that their tech check works, everything's happening, and they're not like scrambling to try to get in when the meeting's already starting. The second hybrid specific element for how they're special is thinking about participation. So basically you want to structure interactions a little more so that there's equal participation. So remote members, for example, you could invite them to speak first when you're doing a discussion in a meeting so that they don't have to try to interject from like a screen, which is really hard to do. You could also designate somebody to manage the chat during the meeting, one of the in-person participants, so that the virtual folks are not left behind. And then you should also definitely consider your breakout strategy. So are you going to group all the folks who are remote together into a breakout and then have everybody in person work together? Or do you want to have an in-person buddy for each remote person so that they can kind of like join a team via a laptop or something like that. And usually mixing it up is a good way to do that so that the remote people don't get sick of each other. And then the last but not least is to be efficient. So again, when it comes to virtual and remote meetings, time is, people's attention spans are just shorter. So just making sure that you are really strict around time and attendance, that you're continue to prioritize asynchronous work, so not everything has to get done in a meeting, and getting feedback along the way so that you can continue to improve, especially if this is a new practice for you in your org. So I just talked at you for a really long time because I wanted to make sure we got through those 4. And you should all have access to the slide deck if you want to flip back through. But I wanted to sort of pause here. Oh, I didn't mean to make it do that. There we go. And have a little bit of a chance to think on these 2 questions. So we're not going to share these out, but we're just going to think to ourselves on it. So what principle resonated most with you and why? And then the second question is, which seems most relevant to your current challenges? And I'm just going to give us about 5 minutes right now to individually do a little reflection on what was just shared, because it was a lot of information. So you can kind of use those 2 prompts to get you thinking. And then I also have an action plan that that you're welcome to tap into as well if it helps you to do some planning. So I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. I'll chat out the action plan template. It looks like this. And just you can feel free to mute your camera, but I just want you to have a chance to sort of process and pick out any nuggets that feel relevant to what you're working on. Cool? All right, 5 minutes, and I'll chat that document right now, in case you're a Google Doc user. You're also welcome to just action plan in whatever format it works for you. So it's just really, if this is helpful, use it. Otherwise, you're welcome to use your own stuff. All right, everyone. So if you are off camera, but for your planning, you're welcome to rejoin us on camera. We're going to move forward to the next section here. And then we'll keep moving into, you'll get a little more time in a few minutes to revisit your planning. Ooh, that was funny. Didn't mean to do that. 1 second. All right, so the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit more at you, but hopefully not for too long. And my goal for this next part is to think about meeting design and specifically help to spark some creativity. It sounds like maybe this time of year with so many months of remote facilitation under our belts, it's a time to rethink and think of some new strategies. So hopefully we can do that and help to increase people's team's productivity and impact. And then again, like I said, after I share some strategies and a few specific meeting examples, you'll have a chance to, again, brainstorm a little bit on what makes sense to take back with you. So the first strategy when it comes to designing your meetings for a remote or a hybrid meeting is to think beyond the live meetings. And I think from this group, sounds like that could be happening. But I think just really thinking about, in addition to the time when you're all together, what does the rest of the work look like? So incorporating things that people need to read or watch a video in advance in order to introduce new concepts or ideas. This is something similar if you're an education person, which I've worked in education, so sorry if I bring too much of that, but the flipped classroom concept. So thinking about if you do the sort of more reading the textbook at home, and then when you come into the classroom, there's more dialogue and sort of creativity that can happen. So thinking about that for meetings, it works really well if you can keep your content short and have there be more interaction in your virtual spaces. And one way to do that is to use pre-work or use asynchronous workspaces. The other concepts on here are pretty similar to what we've talked about in terms of some of the facilitation strategy systems, but working to make sure your digital spaces are organized and also incorporating things like a whiteboard into what we've been doing. So just to pause right here and hear from folks out in the room, out in the world. Are there any examples that come to mind of any of these three in today's workshop? Meaning this one that we're in right now.
I think one that obviously comes to mind is the pre-work, just to get you thinking of it. So that was definitely one.
Nice. Yep. I did that on purpose. So that was good. Any other ones that come up for people? Well, since I don't have a shared drive with all of you, I didn't get to organize the spaces, but I did incorporate kind of a quote whiteboard just using the slide deck itself when we were taking notes. And sometimes that's nice to see when you do have breakouts, to have people in a shared document and be able to build off of each other's thoughts. And so we did a little mini bit of that. And I'd love to hear from everybody what strategies beyond what we've just talked about, that you've used in terms of thinking outside of the actual meeting time. Anything that works well that you'd love to share?
Okay, I think just an agenda, like you've said. I mean, that's what we use. We use an agenda that seems to keep us going, but I like some of your ideas of social time, turning our meetings into once every 2 weeks instead of every week. It just gets too many. So
yeah. Yeah. So thinking about, but you do have like that sort of agenda structured space that everybody can refer. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So I'm going to move us to the next little concept, and then we'll go into some examples of meetings just to kind of hopefully spark your thinking of design around meeting design. So the next concept though is matching the format to the work. So thinking about when you are, coordinating and managing a meeting, you're really designing it. And the first thing you should start with every time is where you want to end up, right? Begin with the end in mind. And so starting with the goals, it sounds really basic, but sometimes we forget this. And you can do different things and structure your meeting differently based on what you're trying to accomplish. So these are some prompts and some design questions to think about as you're thinking about a specific meeting, whether it's a weekly team meeting or a bi-weekly, or if it's a special event like a retreat or something like that. Or it could be like a strategic planning session. So that thinking about these questions in advance is a way to break out of maybe your habits of what you've already been doing, to think a little differently. And some other considerations is like, who's on your team? How comfortable are they with the tech? Those types of things are going to be really specific to your environment. But I definitely encourage the backwards design approach when it comes to meetings. Otherwise, you'll just forget the reason you're even there and just go through your usual motions. So keeping these in mind, I just want to move into sort of sharing 3 examples. These are types of meetings that can be run either virtually or with a hybrid team. And the goal is to help get creative juices flowing with the group. I want you all to have a chance to sort of think, oh, maybe I've tried that, maybe not, or maybe this is a different version. And then, also consider, like, you want to have the consistency of structure or with systems, but then be able to mix up the structures a little bit. And so this is a way to think about how to freshen up your meeting spaces. So the first meeting type is called a virtual work sprint, or a work sprint, because it can be hybrid as well. It doesn't have to be 100% virtual. And the goal of this meeting, it's a short generative meeting. It consists of focused live collaboration on a high priority project or work product. So it could be something that you're trying to refine, like an idea or a process. You might also need to just kick off a daunting project that's really complicated. So bringing everybody together to sort of dig into it, roll up their sleeves. Or you might be stuck on a project that's, you kind of need to move it forward. And it's a short, focused live collaboration format. So it can help your team to kind of filter out a lot of the distractions, especially people that are working from home, to sort of be like, okay, I'm just going to think about this one thing for this time period. And then employees really love it because they leave the meeting, instead of with more to-dos, they actually like got something off their list. They like got this thing out of the way. So a lot of times that feels good in a different sense than some other meetings formats. And I put some details on, the length and the group size on the slide that I'm not going to just read through, but I wanted to give you that kind of high level overview. And I've used this a lot with a lot of success with both dispersed fully hybrid teams, and then also folks that are fully remote teams, or folks that are hybrid. Any questions about this one? Okay, I'm going to take the silence and move us forward to the next one. So the second example of a pretty different format of a work team is more of a culture focus. So thinking about, certainly, I think Nicole was saying there's been a lot of like emotional processing and space given. So this may or may not be a priority right now, but thinking if you do feel like your team could use additional kind of time to check in, this is a great opportunity to really just put some boundaries on that and set aside a specific time where we're not doing work, we're actually looking to connect on a deeper personal level during this space. And it can be really helpful if you're dealing with lots of uncertainty, and the managers can kind of schedule this with a lot of communication in advance so people know what to expect, to really help to bolster relationships and make sure their team has opportunities for those informal personal connections. And sometimes like there's resistance to like, oh, we're gonna really spend an hour talking to each other about something not related to work. But it's actually ends up being really refreshing for the participants to just have there be like this personal space that maybe they were having one-on-one conversations about, but like they didn't really know where the whole team was on. So it can be a really powerful use of time. And there's some details on here. I'm not going to read through them again, but you have that if you need it. And then the third option is a team stand-up, which I definitely did not create, but I've definitely been used it a lot with hybrid and remote teams really successfully. And I think it helps with that idea around over communication and keeping folks connected. It's a super fast-paced meeting. You'd see it's 20 to 30 minutes usually. And it's a consistent structured agenda. So every time it's kind of a report out to the rest of the team. It helps to sort of highlight accomplishments, which we don't tend to do. We just keep moving on to the next challenge. So it makes you pause and sort of say, hey, look, I did some stuff. And then it also helps to flag upcoming priorities and barriers, and then sort of helps the managers a lot to really know where people are and make sure that they can efficiently surface any urgent needs on their team. So it can be really efficient, a good way to be really efficient with your time. It's helpful when things are changing quickly and people are really busy and it's hard to sort of keep to a longer meeting format. So those are my three, hopefully, ideas that are sparking some thinking. I'm going to give you a minute to do some more individual planning time. So using that same 5 minutes of just self reflection time, go ahead and reflect on these questions. So which strategies stood out to you? And what seemed most relevant to your current challenges. So again, thinking about your meeting design, what feels important, and then you can kind of start to brainstorm what you might take with you to apply. And I'll put 5 minutes on the clock. Everybody, go ahead and wrap up your last thoughts and come on back to the group. Hopefully you had a chance to capture any thoughts that you had around what you wanted to move forward on. And we're going to have a little more time now to did it again. We're going to have a little more time to plan, but in a pair setting. So hold on one second. I will present again. Okay. So this part feels, this is hopefully a chance for you to connect with a buddy and really dig into some of your action planning steps together and have a chance to really think about how you'll also be able to hold each other accountable and also in the future. So it's a chance to really, throw some ideas around with a person around these problems that you've been chewing on this whole time. And then, decide on how you want to support each other. So I am going to pass it to Karen, I believe, to pair you up for this last breakout. And you're going to have about 12 minutes together to do some collaborative planning. And I will, I'll chat out the protocol that you can follow. But essentially just the goal is during this time to just really ask them, the one partner will ask the other partner what actions they're planning on and really listen to that and then switch roles. And the idea is that you'll get a chance to really articulate and say out loud, this is what's next. And as the interviewer, you're definitely welcome to jump in with new ideas or innovations to add to their list of things to try. It's encouraged. All right, I think they're ready. Did everybody get the protocol? I just chatted it out. So you have that in front of you in your room. Thumbs up if you got it. Awesome. All right, Karen, I think we're ready. So I got invited to a breakout room. Is there somebody all by themselves? Okay. And is Kylie just offline maybe? Because she didn't join. Oh, you're muted. Oh, I think you were going to pause the recording too during. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I'd love to hear a little bit. Oh, am I still screen sharing?
No,
Let
I
me
don't
fix
think
that. I meant to be. I'd love to hear from you. How was it for you? What was it like to, how did it feel to share with a partner some of the things that you're planning to do? It's a smaller group now, so go ahead and jump in. Tell us how it was for you.
I will go. I would just say I thought it was actually very productive, and we treated it more just like an open dialogue of just sharing our ideas versus like I'll go and then you go. But it was also like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and so it was really, it felt like very productive and just tangible things that we can do.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to be productive towards the end of the day on a Thursday. That's amazing. But also, yeah, and that you self-authorized to what worked for your group in terms of a format. So that's great. Anyone else want to jump in from the other team, the other group, team, however you want to be defined?
I always just find it helpful to actually like verbalize, your thoughts on actions when, a lot of exercises, you're writing things down, or you're taking notes and stuff, but then actually talking about it and talking it through, you work through details or other things pop into your head when you're actually talking about it. Maybe that's because I've been working alone at home for so long, but it's nice to have that opportunity to talk things out.
Yeah, definitely. The lack of human interaction can really take a toll on creativity, I think, at times. That's awesome. Any other reflections on what it felt like from people that didn't share yet?
Go ahead.
I just say it was good. It was fun. I had a good time. I really liked I'm using a lot of the things that you actually shared and told us to do. So I like this.
That's awesome. So it was affirming some of the stuff that you're already going for. And were you jumping in, Kylie, or just Janelle? I couldn't tell who it was. No. Okay.
I was gonna just say, I don't know if anyone's heard of the virtual puzzle rooms. We were talking about it in our breakout, but just as an idea of like something fun you can do virtually, those puzzle rooms that they were doing where you're like locked in a room physically before COVID and you have to like figure out the puzzles to get out of the room. They have virtual versions of those now.
Wow.
I've done 2 of them, and it's kind of like going through like a video game puzzle almost, but you can have like a team of like, or a group of like 30 people, and they put you on like teams of 10, and it's like timed activity. It's just a really fun, like if you're looking for something that's virtual but fun and very different, I would suggest checking out those virtual puzzle rooms.
Awesome. Nice. I love that suggestion. We've also used Airbnb Experiences does stuff, but it's not the cheapest, but you can do like they're like a sound bath like kind of thing, virtual, and there's like a trivia, like a pretty big variety of team building activities. But you're supporting Airbnb, so there's probably independent contractors that can do just as good of a job. It's a little easier when it's all curated for you. I'm not plugging Airbnb is what I'm saying necessarily.
Nicole, with the puzzle rooms, can you create your own? So like
for the puzzle, you mean?
Yeah, create your own puzzle. So make it Tahoe City specific and
probably. I imagine. I just did it through a company. They had like 3 different puzzle options that were like 3 different themes. I mean, I don't know exactly what it would take, but it might be easier to like contact a company and see if they would like make one for you or something. It's a lot of like clicking into different websites and like entering a code that you figure out, and then it opens another web page that gives you more clues and like that kind of thing.
Tapping into the competitive natures is always good. Okay, well, and if there's any ideas that you all came up with for peer accountability that you want to share out, I'd love to hear if you came up with a plan for that for your pairs. Just curious.
Yeah, I think we came up with what you did was the pre-meeting homework stuff, trying to get them to do stuff ahead of time so they think about it, because I think we're all guilty of waiting till the meeting starts and then it's like, oh yeah, this is what I did. So trying to get them to think about it the day before, and maybe the homework will make them think better. So
yeah, use the brain prep beforehand.
It's one of the things, like it takes effort on the front end, but it could also keep our meetings like much more on track. And one of the things that Kylie said is more focused, just like prep on the front end, and really strong agendas, and just keeping it focused versus like meandering and then we start talking personal and then bring it back, like just really keep it focused. And the team sprints, I think the team sprints are using those more.
Yeah, mixing it up a little for that part. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? I'm gonna let everybody share. Oh, were you about to go, Nicole? I always do that right before you're about to go. No? Okay. So I want to respect the end time here and make sure we wrap up. So I just want to put out there, you're the last 4 standing, so you might be the only ones that like read this, unless everybody reads their emails really closely afterwards. But I'm happy to do a 30-minute free coaching session with anybody if you wanted to, for just for attendees, sometime in April. There'll be a survey that I'll a link in the email that I send as a follow-up if you want to sign up for one of those. Totally optional, but totally free. And it could help if you wanted to sort of pick my brain on like, oh, I'm thinking about trying this thing or whatever. We can kind of go into it. And it could just keep you accountable too. If you have it on the calendar, like I said, I do this and I'm going to meet with Kim in 2 weeks, so I better do some stuff. So if you want to take me up on that, please do. It's coming in a link. And if you don't see that, just send me an email and I'll get it set up for you. And then I just would love to hear from everybody, if possible, just one thing you're really taking away. And also before I say that, there is a link in the chat from Karen around the exit survey. We want to make sure everybody does the survey. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. What's the thing that you're kind of holding right now that you're taking away?
I think the idea of structure and like pre-work for accountability and engagement is an idea that I'm like the biggest one that I'm going to try to utilize for meetings.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Nicole.
I liked inviting in a hybrid setting, inviting those who are on who are remote, inviting them early. So and also asking them to respond first.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just ups the bar a little bit for them.
Yeah, because you can totally get away with coasting when you're the remote. I've been that person. You're just
I
like,
have to.
yeah.
And it's hard to jump in. You're like, I was going to say something. And like,
And then you just give
you're
up.
really good at reading your Zoom room to see that. But a lot of times it's like, you miss your chance.
Yeah. And then you just give up, right? And you just pet the dog or whatever. All right. What else are people taking away? Top of mind.
My big thing is like focused meetings and just the work sprint. I feel like I'm in too many meetings that just go on and like they don't need to. So I really like just the shorter format, just short, punchy, be really focused and like get it done and let's all carry on our day.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm hopeful that for that really helping to shift a new practice for your team. That's cool.
I think one of the first things you do is say, does this meeting need to happen?
Yeah. That should have been one of the questions.
That more.
Kylie or Julie, are there anything that you wanted to throw out there?
I liked your stand-up format. That was good. I put that in my list. That seems to give people a voice to say what they've done, what they need. So I'm adding that to our agenda.
You have to be so rigid too with the timing. Like everybody gets like 2 minutes. That's it.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
So that's the hardest part. But once they realize that you're not kidding about the timing, they'll get with the program pretty quick.
Yeah, I've got a couple talkers, so yeah. 2 minutes sound good.
And Kylie, putting you on the spot, anything you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I think I will just have a challenging time coming up with some best practices for meetings. A lot of my meetings aren't with staff, they're with volunteers or volunteer board members, committee members. So, being too rigid and tough isn't, I set agendas, but it's also a social time and fun time for people. So I don't want to take that away because they're volunteering. If I make it no fun, then I will have no board members or volunteers. Just thinking about a way and working with the board on what they're going to want to do in terms of board meetings. Are they going to be okay with hybrid? Do we wait till we can completely be in person and do everything on Zoom? Because there's already, like any board, there's already issues with dominant board members that talk most of the time. And if they're the ones that are going to be there in person, then it's just going to continue that. And I would say for my staff meetings, I want to work on the work sprint a little bit better and not gab as much, focused, but yeah.
You got to find put the boundaries on the gabbing, right?
So I do want to ask one thing, Kim, about Kylie's board meetings. If it's hybrid, so how many people are on your board? It's like 8 or 10?
10 right now.
So if it's hybrid, everybody who's in person should still be with a computer in front of them on Zoom, right?
I mean, that's a best practice that I recommend. It's a little hard. Like it can be, it's so much more engaging when people do that. I've done it where literally we're sitting in a conference room and we each have a laptop in front of us with Zoom so that it's just like a level playing field kind of thing, and everybody's showing up in the space, it's so hard to hear and follow when there's a discussion and there's just like one little screen, you know, on the side where the person is. So especially for smaller meetings, like an 8 or 10 person meeting, it's not that difficult to have everybody just bring a laptop and log in. So I would definitely recommend that. But I understand sometimes it's a necessary evil sometimes with like an all staff to have the remote people just floating on a screen, but it's definitely, if you can pull it off, having everybody log in is a good practice for hybrid.
And I think, you know, initially, Kylie, your hybrid meetings are going to be fewer. There'll be fewer people in person and more people remote. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Well, I'd be happy to chat more about it if you wanted to take me up on one of those 30-minute slots. I'm happy to do that because it sounds like a fun, interesting problem. From the outside, it's probably less fun for you, but you know. All right, well, that's all I have. Is there anything, Karen, that you wanted to share before we go?
We have one more workshop. I know it's after 4 o'clock, so we're going to just one sentence about it. Shannon's coming back with Dr. Christina Fredericks from Sierra Nevada University to talk about introverts and extroverts and what you can learn from each other, you know, working remotely and then getting back into it. So it should be interesting. She's really excited. Shannon's super excited about it. So next week, Thursday at 9 o'clock.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kim.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great to get to know you all again and see some familiar faces as well. I think, Kylie, I worked with your husband, so I was like, wait, Bigelow, I know him.
Oh,
So we did this.
You worked at Bluestone for a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I did this like, Karen, is that who that is?
Yeah.
No. Small world. But thanks, y'all. It was really fun to be here.
Good to
Thanks,
see
everyone.
you all.
Take care.
Karen, good luck to you with your shoulder,
Yeah,
collarbone, all
thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.